Hello, welcome to an Australia and Israel Space and Technology Opportunities for Collaboration, and includes a presentation on the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth Conference for 23rd to 24th of October 2023, and we'll also hear some pitch sessions at the end of this session. My name is Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with My Security Media. I'm going to be the back-end moderator to this particular session, and I'll introduce you to some of the protocols. This is being recorded, and the recorded session will be made available later. There may be some edits if needed. Media may be present during this session, and Q&A is welcome and encouraged, so please use the Q&A part of the Zoom platform. If you don't know Australia in Space, we publish the Australia in Space magazine and also produce Australia in Space TV, and our news channel is Space and Defence channel, so you can subscribe to those. And this particular session is part of a national series of forums that we've been holding recently in Sydney and in Brisbane. Later this week, we'll be in Canberra with the Australian National University. And also we mentioned Perth. There's been a number of events in Perth, and this is in the lead up to the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth Conference, 23 to 24 October. Thank you to our national sponsors, Fugro Spark, Curtin University and Arose, and our community and educational supporters, One Giant Leap Australia Foundation and the Andy Thomas Space Foundation. So without further ado, we'll welcome our first presenters, Ohad Bloomberg, the Israel Trade Commissioner, Head of Israel Trade and Economic Commission, Embassy of Israel in Australia, and David Mattray, my joint Managing Director with My Security Media. Gents, we'll hand over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Great to see you all, and thanks for coming on. We've got quite a jam-packed agenda coming up for this particular meeting. We've been putting together the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth Conference, and in the lead up to that, what we'd like to do is highlight some of the opportunities between Australia and Israel from an economic point of view and also from a trade point of view. And it's really great to have such an illustrious group of people here with us at the moment in terms of representatives from the Israeli Space Agency, the Australian Space Agency, the Israeli Trade Commission and Austrade. And I'll also be giving a bit of an overview about what we're actually doing after James Ewan from the WA Jobs, Tourism, Science Innovation talks about the opportunity in WA. And then we'll follow that obviously from a commercial point of view with some company pitches. So lots coming up over in the next hour and a half, and so stay tuned. And I'll hand it over now to Ohad Bloomberg, who's the Israeli Trade Commissioner to Australia. Ohad.
Thank you very much, David, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon from Australia, and good evening and good morning for those who joined us from Israel this morning. It is a great pleasure to open this first of its kind event aimed to shed some light on the potential synergies between the Israeli space tech ecosystem and the Australian one. As David mentioned, my name is Ohad Bloomberg, and I'm the Israeli Trade Commissioner in Australia. And to tell you a little bit about us, for those of you who haven't heard of us, the Israel Trade Commission, based in Sydney, is in fact the commercial arm of the Embassy of Israel and part of the Israeli Ministry of Economy and Industry. And what we do is we serve as a bridge between Australian businesses and Israeli technologies. And our primary objective is to promote and facilitate trade, investments, and commercial partnerships between Israel and Australia. It is no secret that the Israeli tech ecosystem is regarded as one of the best in the world. A few numbers to emphasize that: more than 9,000 startups and tech companies in a country of just over 9 million people, more than 530 multinational corporations have some kind of research and development activity in Israel. 15% of Israel's GDP derive from the high-tech industry, and nearly 6% of Israel's GDP is invested in R&D. That's the highest percentage in the world. And Israel's journey into space began in the late 1980s. Since then, it has emerged as a global leader in space technology and innovation. Its success can be attributed to the unwavering commitment to excellence, determination to put the boundaries of what is possible. And Israel, is a rather small country, roughly the third the size of Tasmania, and is a member of a very, very small group of countries that possess orbital launching capabilities. And although Israel and Australia are far apart from each other, we already see great collaborations in many sectors. And I believe that space can be the new era for this relationship that has yet to be fully explored. Specifically in space, I think that the countries completed one another and can have great projects that can arise together. There are already some collaborations between Israelis and Australians around the ambitious Israeli-led Bereshit 2 lunar expedition, and we would like to see more of these. And I'm really, really grateful that we have today the most relevant key players in the countries in space: Israeli and Australian Space Agency, Australian, Western Australian government, Earth and Beyond Ventures, and of course our partners for this session, which we couldn't have done it without you, the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth Conference and My Security Media. And we hope that this online session, followed by the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth Conference in October, which you'll hear about later from David, can serve as the first of many milestones to explore together. And we really hope to see Israeli companies attending this promising conference. And I can assure you that my office, with our partners, will assist in any way we can to promote business interactions and introductions in the conference itself. And we would like to make sure that your attendance will be worthwhile. And for the Australian audience, I hope that after today, you will regard Israel as a potential partner for space-related activities. And I welcome you to engage with our office in order to hear more about business collaboration with Israel. So I'm really keen to hear about what the other speakers have prepared for us today. So without further ado, allow me to present our next speaker, Ms. Ortal Chazut. Ortal is the Director of Business Development at the Israel Space Agency and will share with us her role in the agency and some insights about the Israeli landscape and the role of the agency in promoting the Israeli industry and ecosystem. So Ortal, is to you.
Good morning from Israel. Thank you, Ohad, for the introduction and for this great event. As I said before, my name is Ortal. I'm the Director of Business Development at the Israeli Space Agency. Can you go to the next slide, please? For start, I would like to make a little clarification. Many people, when they hear Israel, they automatically combine it with security and defense, which is sometimes true. But regarding to the Israeli Space Agency, it's important to emphasize that the agency is responsible for the National Civilian Space Program of Israel. Next slide, please. The meaning of it, I think it brings a higher focus on the industry and on the companies and the way we look at them, and we'll talk about it in a minute. So maybe just a quick wider perspective about the Israel Space Agency. We look at four main pillars. The space industry, of course, we'll talk about it in a minute. And the second one is the international collaboration. I think all of us know that space is still it's an issue of states. States are involved, and therefore in order to make any, I think, space industry activities, many times you have to involve countries. So we collaborate with many other agencies and government. The third thing, of course, is the space exploration and the research and technology, also very connected to the other pillars. And the last one, when we're looking to the future, the education and the programs that make our next generation prepared to take the lead, it is very important to have all these kind of pillars and understand how does the agency look at this, the whole subject of space and its part in the state of Israel. Next slide, please. So here you can see our vision about space industry, and we dive into the industry. We want to actually operate to strengthening and developing the civilian space industry in Israel as a sustainable growth engine. Next slide, please. So yeah, this thing, I think it got very strong in the last, I would say, 2 years. The Israeli Space Agency strategized its plans and focused on the companies, the Israeli ecosystem. Here you can see, Ohad said it before, Israel is a small country. We have 60 companies. It depends on what day you ask me, because you know how startups sometimes there's many changes, but we have the numbers are pretty much like this. It's 50 companies and 10 startups. it's not a large market, but I have to say and try to stay objective, even though I'm an Israeli, that in this 60 you can find many unique technology, very special creativity and innovation. And our companies, you'll see it in the next part of this event, the technology is really remarkable. So about our space heritage, also I had mentioned it before, and I have to relate to that. We have 40 years of space program, which means that the government is funding many programs in many levels for a few decades. We're the 8th country to launch a rocket to space. I think it's a remarkable thing to know that although we're very small, our abilities in the space field are meaningful. And we're the 7th country to go to the moon. And if we have to be more precise, I think it's the first time that a private entity fund a mission to the moon. Next slide, please. So I'm sorry that the resolution is not optimal, but this is actually a part of a survey that we did with the Israeli companies to understand the segments and the way it divided the Israeli market. So you can see that the two of the main leading segments are system and integrator and subsystems. I hope you see the numbers, but you can see that it doesn't sum up to 60 because many of the Israeli companies, they relate and do more than one segment. And also we can see in this graph that the division between the segments are pretty diverse. Next step, please. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Israeli Space Agency is working and how it looks to the space industry and operates and how we actually make our vision come true or try to make it come true. So an interesting thing that we discovered when we did a survey and also had a discussion with the companies is that one of the main barriers for entrepreneurs in Israel is the infrastructure issues. So a couple of months ago, we published a tender. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a winner. And the idea is to make a one-stop shop for the entrepreneurs, a place where they can have all the facilities they need without being dependent on maybe the larger companies in Israel in an affordable price, and have the recruitment test and also other services to support their business, like mentoring, legal advisory, etc. The second thing is connecting the companies with foreign agencies, government, as business sector. I talked about it a couple of minutes ago. It is very important to connect the companies to the right people in the right organization. And it sounds simple, but I don't think it's that simple. And I think this is the place we'll bring value to the companies. Either they approach us and we try to make the connection, or the other way around by making all this kind of activities like today's event to make the thing work together, the business and the agencies and the government. Next slide, please. Okay, so investing in companies, I think it goes without saying that space is an expensive business. Companies need money. So we have, every year we have a project when we fund a joint, it's a joint project with the Innovation Authority in Israel, and we encourage new companies and startups to bring new technologies and new ideas to the market. So we fund these companies. The next thing is collaborating with Israeli space ecosystem and space industry community. We have many entities in Israel, NGOs, all kind of players that act in the field of space. Because it's not a large market, because it's not a big country, it makes it easier. And we try to combine all the players together and make activities, meetups, pitching nights, everything that we can do to make the Israeli ecosystem to spread their technologies and products. And the last thing that I wasn't sure if it was connected, but after I thought about it again, it's definitely connected. We are in the middle of a process in the Israeli Space Agency to shape the regulation and the space law and the policy. And I think that when you do a beneficial policy that is right for the companies, that it make it easier on them to do their business, so you can attract new players, and you can also make the companies stays in Israel and develop their business. Yes, so this was, I think, the last subject. So you can definitely encourage you to reach out. We're not, one of our advantages is we're not a huge agency. We're very accessible. So let me know if I can help you with any idea you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ortal. And likewise for the audience, if you want to get in touch, just let us know in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that you're put into contact. So thank you very much, Ortal. Very interesting. And without further ado, our next speaker is Dr. Tony Robinson, Director, International and Government Engagement, Australian Space Agency, and Michael Platt, ATDO and Investment Director, the Australian Trade and Defence Office with Austrade. Gents, thank you very much. We're going to hear from Tony first and then Michael, and I'll walk through their slides. So Tony, over to you.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Chris, and good morning to Israeli colleagues and good afternoon to Australian colleagues. And of course, thank you to Chris and David for putting on this event, which I'm very happy to be a part of. I just wanted to give you a really quick overview of the Australian Space Agency and the space ecosystem before turning over to my colleague Michael for a more in-depth focus on trade-related elements. Next slide, please. So Australia has quite a long and proud history of in space, dating back over 65 years. Early day involvement in launch activities, satellites development, and also a very strong tradition of communications and tracking through a network of ground stations in Australia. But it really wasn't until recently that we developed or established the Australian Space Agency as a focal point for the space sector in Australia. So today we are just over 5 years old, having been established in July 2018. So we're very much a new space agency, and we came about, I suppose, during the new space age, where there's a pronounced shift away from traditional space sector involvement financed through government investment towards really uplifting and building our homegrown space sector. So our specific charter as a space agency is to transform and grow a globally respected space industry that is there to inspire Australians and is also underpinned by strong national and international engagement. So very similar to the Israeli Space Agency, we have 4 core pillars, which focus on industry growth, responsible behaviour, international engagement, and inspiration of Australians. And as part of our early development of our space agency and bringing together our different capabilities across the sector, we mapped out 7 key priority areas, which are shown on screen. And these were really a recognition of current competitive advantages that Australia has, for example, in communications, technologies, and robotics and automation, as well as aspirational areas where we saw real opportunities for growth and development, such as access to space. Next slide, please. So during our 5 years, we've already had some very significant achievements funded through largely government programs to begin with. So we had a major space infrastructure fund, which allowed us to establish a space operations centre, as well as Australian Space Discovery Centre, which is based in Adelaide as part of our headquarters. And we've also had some significant investment through our international partners. For example, one of our first big programs was a Moon to Mars initiative, which was in support of NASA's broader Artemis program, as well as our very successful International Space Investment Fund, which we've just expanded to include a specific component for Indian-related business activities. So we'll see how this program evolves in the future. Lots of possibilities there. But I wanted to, I guess, draw back to the international partnerships side of our space agency, which I represent as the Director of International Partnerships. And it's been a real focal point of us as an agency to try to leverage those relationships and those established networks globally that other space agencies have, and Australia can add value to those big global programs and supply chains. Next slide, please. So some of our major international partnerships that we've worked on to date are supporting Israel's Gaganyaan mission, their inspirational human spaceflight mission, establishing an Australia-UK space bridge arrangement, which at the heart of it is a trade-related arrangement aimed to enhance and promote greater trade opportunities between Australia and the UK. Also nurturing our relationship with Japan and acting as a return site for their recent their recent Hayabusa 2 mission, and also confirming our intention to support their future MMX mission, as well as negotiating a technology safeguards agreement with the US, which we see as really opening the door for international launch-related activities in Australia. And I know it's something that certainly Israel has a proud heritage of, with developing capability there. And we'd certainly like to see more international partners come to Australia to provide launch services there. Next slide, please. So what's next for us? We've had 5 years already on the board. We've had some big achievements. So now we're very much focusing on the future and how we can, I guess, leverage space and see space as being intertwined with some of our government's broader objectives around robotics, automation, and quantum research. So we really see space here in Australia as being central and underpinning to our economy. So it enables lots of different functions and aspects. And importantly for us, we see space as a driver of developing high-tech jobs and high-tech skills. So we, along with other parts of our government, have taken up the mantra, I suppose, to create 1.2 million new tech jobs by 2030, of which space will be a very important component, and developing a future workforce that can meet the growing capabilities demand from space and also other high-tech jobs. Importantly, though, international partnerships will remain a central part of our role and function in the Australian space ecosystem. And I'll turn over now to my colleague, Michael, who will give you a bit more of an in-depth overview of the Australia-Israeli trade landscape. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, my name is Michael Platt. Very excited to be able to participate in this forum. So we are part of the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, which means we are under the Minister of Trade in Australia, colleagues both in Australia and around the world. Our team in Israel is part of the Australian Embassy team with an additional office in Jerusalem to support both Australian and Israeli companies. Now, the function of the Australian Trade and Investment Commission is basically twofold. It all revolves around supporting businesses and consulting for businesses, and in our case, in the two directions. On the one hand, supporting Australian businesses in the global marketplace, looking for ways to enter foreign markets, in this case, the Israeli market, and on the other side, assisting and providing really strategically targeted advice and services to potential international or Israeli investor companies who are potentially interested in getting involved in the industries in Australia and establishing a presence potentially as well. And the Australian Trade and Investment Commission has been quite involved from the beginning with the local space industry in Australia in supporting the ASA and other ecosystem partners. And so we actually also have an in-house team within Austrade to support the space industry as well. And we work as a team to collaborate to assist the companies. Next slide, please. Just to add to that role that Austrade has had in collaborating with the Space Industry Association Australia to create something that is really, really exciting, the Australian Space Industry Capability Database. One thing we find especially in tracking different industries and finding opportunities for companies, that it's very important to map the data and to gather the data, because only if you see what's going on, you can then tap in and find gaps where you can add and bring additional value. And so this new database, which hopefully will come online in the near future, hopefully in the coming months, will really provide a wide range of information and statistics with regard to capabilities in Australia, workforce, company profiles, to be able to see what's going on in the country, what companies, what functionalities, and how value can be added and brought across the spectrum. Next slide, please. Now, the main function, as I said, and we can detail this a little bit more, is how we can assist companies, because especially in a very sort of niche industry like space, it's important to be able to identify for each company essentially what its main role is in an ecosystem and how it can plug in and add value to others. So we initially assist companies with understanding sort of, first of all, where they're coming from, if there's specific questions or issues, market intelligence related to functions that they may be looking for, or projects and other opportunities in market, information about the regulatory environment, whether it's navigating regulatory processes, agencies, and organizations, and being in contact with them in order to facilitate a company's plans. Identification of partners, whether that is for trade to Israel, for example, some kind of partner in a project, or distributor if it's a type of product, or in Australia also partners for various projects and for enabling the company's plans in Australia. Certainly advice as well, you know, various grants, programs and approval processes, travel, which has become more popular lately, and overall shaping the strategy, because essentially when a company is going into a foreign market, it is very confusing and difficult when one is unfamiliar. And so we're that support arm that can help both the Australian companies looking at the Israeli market, and also Israeli companies looking at the Australian market, particularly with an eye for investment and for establishing a presence in Australia. So thank you very much for enabling us to participate, and please reach out with questions, ideas, and looking forward to being in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. Do appreciate that. Details are on the screen, and likewise, if you want to get in touch, you can just reach out. We're not getting any questions so far. There was one question on, is this session being recorded? The answer is yes, and it will be made available. So thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is Mr. James Ewan, Director of Space with the WA Government and Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation. And James, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, and I apologise. I think my camera's playing out with the internet today. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about Western Australia's space industry. It's a great honour to have the opportunity to have ASA and Israel also join us for this sort of first event between our two countries. Just go to the next slide. Important aspect of Western Australia, I think, is our broader economy, which really reflects the growth and our capability and activities within the space sector as well. So just in terms of the Western Australia, we're the largest state with an area of over 250 million square kilometres. You know, in 2021 to 22, our gross state product, which is a measure of the size of the economy, was 377 billion. And this accounted for about 17.5% of the Australian economy, with Western Australia having only 11% of the Australian population. So for the population versus the contribution, it's quite high. Also, in terms of what we actually export, Western Australia exports 55.5% of the Australian exports come from Western Australia, and that's around a total of about $223 billion of export goods. So not only is it our size that's quite large, but our contribution for a very small population is quite large. And that really then translates to the need for Western Australia to rely on technology and innovation to actually deliver that, obviously operating in remote environments with obviously workforce challenges and global competition for with other countries in terms of the resources that we export. So just on the slide, you can see some of there. We're the world's largest producer for iron ore. Sorry, on this slide, third largest producer for LNG and the third largest producer for gold. So quite significant contributor and quite a lot of economic activity within the state. Just the next slide. So just in terms of government priorities, obviously we are very mining focused and resource focused, but the state government, one of our key priorities for the state government is to diversify that economy, not only to help smoothen out obviously the market fluctuations that happen within those sectors, but also to really capitalise on the huge opportunities we have in a number of other sectors, and that includes space. So there's a number of priority sectors the state government's been identified. You can see them along the slide there: energy, tourism, international education, defence. We're a critical lead in the AUKUS partnership in terms of really setting that stewardship for nuclear submarine maintenance that will be happening from Western Australia. Mining is still, again, we're not walking away from mining, but we're actually looking at how do we harness and utilise all that activity with mining, especially the cross-sector technology. How do we take and utilise that for space, which I'll talk to in a second, but also how do we actually utilise space data and technology to improve those activities? And some other ones are health, life science, and primary industries. So some of the key drivers we also have in Western Australia is a real energy transition to sustainability, reducing our greenhouse emissions and advancing sustainable energy projects. And that's actually helping support, again, space companies, but also drawing on space technology. Trade and investment is another key focus, and that's, again, a focus of today's discussion. And again, that's really reflecting on Western Australia is actually much more externally focused in terms of our economy. And we're very keen to continue engaging and supporting trade and investment with our with nations, and especially the Indo-Pacific region. And that's one of those focuses of the conference, which Dave will talk to later. So just going into particularly why WA for space, Western Australia. We've had a long history in space in Western Australia, going back to about 60 years with the OTC dish up in Carnarvon, the north of the state, providing support for NASA's Apollo missions and other moon missions. Some of the industry capability and advantages that Western Australia have, our latitude and longitude. So we're ideal geographic location for the global coverage of space assets, obviously working very neatly with Europe and the US. Also, there's a bit of interest in polar and sun synchronized launch, which we are supporting, or companies that are pursuing those options. And ideal environmental conditions. So we have lots of space, dry, clear skies. We have Australia's only ACMA, which is our national regulator for obviously radio frequencies. We have the only designated satellite park within Western Australia, and we also have the Murchison Radio Quiet Zone. We have significant existing infrastructure, which I'll show you on a map, and that also not only includes the space ground segment, but also high performance computing and local technical expertise in both supporting that infrastructure. World-leading capabilities in remote operations, automation, and robotics. We also have got some world-leading capabilities in cybersecurity. We've reduced at least 30% of the cybersecurity graduates in Australia. Got substantial capabilities in space systems, ground station, astronomy, planetary research, extensive activities with international partners. So we have NASA with assets here, the European Space Agency, JAXA, Pulsar, Swedish Space Corp, Arianespace, and a whole range of other private companies. We also have a very diverse economy, which focuses on, and a strong focus on technology transfer, which I've got a slide that will talk to that, with obviously space and terrestrial sectors a key focus, particularly for what we're trying to do in terms of growing the space sector as well. So we're not just looking at the upstream, we're also very focused on the downstream and then the mix in between those two. Research and innovation, we have a number of universities doing various space-focused and research activities, and a highly diverse and skilled workforce. So we have a lot of companies that are operating here with their space services, and a lot of companies who you could say in the downstream aspects, and then obviously we're trying to grow those companies in the upstream. A lot of transferable skills. So a lot of the resource sector employees have gone from our West Australian companies into space companies. The head of the Australian Space Agency is a prime example of that, previously working in the West Australian resource sector, and now is the head of, then obviously going off and working in the space sector, and now heading up the Australian Space Agency. Just in terms of our position, we're strategically positioned to take advantage of national and regional opportunities. Again, very much focused on that Indo-Pacific. So this slide is just a map of the Western Australian infrastructure. I won't go through everything. I'll just highlight a couple of key ones, but you can see that we've got quite an extensive, we host extensive infrastructure related to space. Some of the key ones, we've got European Space Agency's New Norcia Deep Space Ground Station. They have one deep space ground station there and a second one being built. Once that second one's completed, that will be 50% of their deep space ground station network located in Western Australia. They are also building a calibration for their biomass satellite, and that was the only calibration site in the world there as well. We also have Goonhilly, UK Goonhilly, building a deep space ground station in Western Australia, and Swedish Space Corp also building another deep space ground station. So not only is the traditional low Earth LEO ground station segment growing here, but we've also got quite a bit of the deep space network. We also have this square kilometre array project. We have the low telescope of the project, and that's a $2.2 billion US project. So it's the largest radio telescope project in the world, and that's being built in the middle of the Murchison up north. And we are getting a lot of, again, not only a lot of expertise in the radio astronomy field, but we're actually translating a lot of those technologies and such as laser comms coming out of that, and passive radar coming out of the precursor research and innovation that's been put into that project. Space situation awareness, some significant infrastructure here. The US have their US Space Surveillance Telescope. In here we have a number of other providers such as Leo Labs, and we also then have JAXA and Pulsar and a whole range of other telescopes that are located across Western Australia. Just some state government funding commitments that we've made include the ROSE, which is the Australian Remote Operations of Space and Earth. So they're focused on really translating our terrestrial remote ops to space, but also then looking at how you, I suppose, take some of the space data and technology and utilize that within the mining and resource sector, given our size and scale. And so that's really a two-way street between the mining and resource sector and the space sector. We've also funded Fugro Spark, which is a space automation AI command and control center. That is a world-leading remote operations center that will be supporting lunar missions from late this year. Their partner is Intuitive Machines, and they're already supporting, they'll be supporting 3 of their upcoming lunar missions. And that partnership will then continue in a commercial sense, and also open up other opportunities with international space agencies who are really looking to access both a southern and a redundant sort of remote operations or space mission operations capability. So they are really, again, aiming for the hardest and the most complex mission operation services, and their first mission will be a lunar one. So that will sort of set them in terms of demonstrating their capability and compliance against national standards. We also support Curtin University for the Binar space program. They're building some small CubeSats, you know, really great program that's really focused on building that future workforce, but also some niche and innovative technology. Australian Space Data Analysis Facility, really looking at how we can utilize space data. LATConnect 60s, we should be talking later. The state government's invested in helping them grow their digital platform, but also access Earth observation data for the benefit of the state government. And a ROSE Trailblazer-led mission that includes Fugro Spark. It was one of 2 companies that were down selected through the Australian Space Agency's Moon to Mars mission, and they'll be looking to build a lunar rover, or put a bid in to build a lunar rover, and one of those companies will be down selected then to build and operate that in 2026, 2027 in partnership with NASA. So we do hope that that's successful and that that's built in Western Australia. I'll just quickly run through this, but this is just quickly shows some of the cross-sector activity. On the top left there, you'll see a NASA Falcon Robonaut. That's one of 5 in the world. I believe it's the only one outside the US, and that sits within Woodside, one of our oil and gas companies. So they have a long-term established relationship with NASA, and have, again, both have clear objectives in having certainly manned and remotely operated infrastructure. Next to it is the Spark facility that will be operating and supporting Intuitive Machines lunar missions. And on the left, if you go down to the bottom, we've got the Pawsey Supercomputer Center and Doug's Supercomputer. So that's the largest research and the largest private supercomputers in the southern hemisphere. Both of them are working with space in terms of radio astronomy, but also looking at how you better process and more quickly process Earth observation data and other space situation awareness as well. In the middle, Earth observation is another key focus. We're obviously looking at how do we be a leader from our size and our regional activity, is how can we actually be a leader in the utilisation of Earth observation data for the benefit not only of industry but for government. If you look at the pictures in the middle, through our radio astronomy is an example. Laser communications, there's some very unique laser communications work being undertaken from the University of Western Australia in the phase stabilisation. We've got some world-leading records in terms of the transmission of that terrestrially, in terms of horizontally, and they're just going to be building a second laser communication station to trial and test that in space. On the top right, there's the radio astronomy, which I've spoken to. Just the bottom one's a quick, unique one. A company called First Mode, who were traditionally a space company working on the the Mars rovers, are now transferring their technology to create hydrogen electric haul truck engines. And so they're really focused on decarbonising our heavy industry within the mining sector. So again, Western Australia is not only about, I suppose, growing our space sector and obviously utilising the data, but we're also about how can we better utilise technology and innovation that's been developed through the space sector to actually help improve operations, decarbonise, and improve efficiencies in our broader sector and industry. And just the last slide, just quickly, just some of our focus areas. I'll quickly run through this. Obviously, space missions, remote operations. We're really, one of our visions is to establish Western Australia as a Southern Hemisphere's global hub for space operations and exploration. Obviously, continue to grow that ground infrastructure. How do we actually link up that infrastructure and also with our high performance computing here? Again, end-to-end Earth observation, space science, building on what we already do here in the universities, advanced technology. Again, how do we grow what we're already doing now, but also benefit that across sector? Technology transfer, again, is a very big one. So especially with Israel, there's a lot of innovation, not only advanced space sector as well, but how do you actually utilize some of that technology and innovation terrestrially is what we're very much interested in. And supporting launch and polar, and obviously STEM and outreach and growing that skilled workforce. That's it for me. Thank you very much. I'll jump off now so we've got some time for the rest of everyone else.
Thank you very much, James. Do appreciate that. And again, that information will be available. And without further ado, I'll hand over to David Mattray there in Perth with My Security Media. David?
Hi, everyone. Great to be back again. So I thought I'd give you a quick overview about what we're actually doing for the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth Conference. And I think in terms of the people we've just had on, I think that shows the enthusiasm of people to come together from an agency level and from a commercial level. And that's really the spirit of what we're trying to create here, but in person. Sometimes Teams is okay, Zoom is okay, but if you can bring people together, magic happens in the room. And in light of that, in spirit of that, we couldn't do this without the support of various people, that are behind us as well. So we just like to make a quick mention and a quick thanks to our partners in terms of Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation, Business Events Perth, Arose, Curtin University, Fougas Spark and University of Western Australia. So what are we doing? We're bringing together leaders from across the Indo-Pacific and beyond for opportunities in space and on Earth technology. So it's a lot of the downstream play. It's the inaugural conference, but I have to tell you, we've got a huge number of people coming from an enthusiastic point of view. We've already got 70 speakers from 12 different countries. And again, the focus is around trade, investment and collaboration. Sometimes there's a lot of agency-to-agency discussions, and that's great, but we're trying to create commercial opportunities here. So part of what we're trying to do here is the cross-sector applications of space technology. So, for example, space into resources, space into agriculture. Streams that we'll be looking at will be, for example, robotics and remote operations, sustainability and energy, cybersecurity, education, so from a STEM point of view, and also workforce development. And it's a two-way discussion. In many cases, there's space technology which will help the on-Earth industries, but in a lot of cases, there's also some terrific innovation which is happening, for example, in remote operations and autonomous systems, which can also help the space companies. So it's realistically about bringing people together from both sides to collaborate. So multiple industries, multiple streams, multiple countries, bring them all together. And again, we're trying to create some magic. So we'll sort of give you a bit of an overview about some of the people coming, and this is just a snapshot. We've got new people registering all the time, and these are speakers that we're sort of showing here. 12 different countries we have speakers from, and if you look to the right, you'll see some of the highlight speakers, and you'll see there's people out of NASA from a senior leadership point of view. So, for example, we have James Free, who's the mission director for the Artemis mission, through to David Korsmeyer, who's the deputy director of NASA Ames, senior leadership for the Australian Space Agency. But then as we sort of look at the others, there's also people from agriculture, from the resource sector, robotics, remote operations. It's quite diverse, and we sort of would like to welcome, the Israeli companies to come. So one of the things I'd probably like to give you a bit of an overview of is actually what this actually starts to look like as a conference. So the conference itself goes for 2 days. It goes for a Monday and a Tuesday, but it's a little bit more than that. So what we're doing on the Sunday evening as people arrive, we're doing a really nice welcome reception on the rooftop of the Art Gallery of Western Australia. We're trying to create lots of opportunities for people to network. It's not meant to be the sort of conference where you're just watching a stage and you're listening to people speak. Yes, they'll be part of that, but it's about networking. It's about creating opportunities for people to talk to each other. And hence we're starting off with a networking function on the very first night. On the Monday and the Tuesday, we've got plenary sessions, lots of breakouts, lots of places for people to eat together and so forth. But what I'll also highlight to you on the right-hand side of the screen is we've chosen this particular venues because there's plenty of meeting rooms. So when you come to this particular conference, we want you to be able to have private meetings with people. We want you to have discussions about how you can collaborate, whether that's from a trade point of view, an investment point of view, looking for that sort of stuff. It's not a case where we've seen in many conferences where you have people sort of congregating around a coffee cart and trying to have high-level conversations. We've tried to take it to the next level and provide that opportunity to actually have proper conversations. So that's the conference element, but what we've actually got is an extended element here as well. So on the Wednesday and the Thursday, there's opportunities for site visits, and these pictures here are just some of the sites that you'll be able to visit. As James just mentioned, we've got a world-class remote operations centre in terms of Fugro Spark, and you'll be able to visit that if you wish. Curtin University has got some fantastic facilities, as does the University of Western Australia, and there's plenty of others as well. So it's a case of going to the conference, networking, but also seeing different things at the end of the day. And of course, I have to tell you, I'm not originally from Perth. I've moved to Perth because it's a beautiful place. So if you're coming all the way from Israel or indeed from any other country, I think you'll enjoy the trip as well. That's what the rooftop of the art gallery looks like on for the opening reception. Chris, we can go to the next slide as well. In terms of just to sort of sum up in terms of that opportunity, there's plenty of information on the actual website as well. We're continually updating that with new speakers and developing out the program and so forth. You can register there. You can also what we'd also like to encourage, in particular from the Israeli side, we'd like to shout out to Doron Zauer from Earth and Beyond Ventures. Doron's been instrumental in bringing a delegation out from Israel, and that's together with Ohad Bloomberg from the Israeli Trade Commission. We know there's a number of companies that have committed to coming, which is terrific, and we look forward to welcoming those. What we'd also like to do is encourage you, if you are interested, speak to us and or speak to Doron, and we can coordinate with you. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Doron Zauer. Doron Zauer is the general partner of Earth and Beyond Ventures, which invests in space and deep tech. And Doron will also be at the conference and he'll be speaking. So look forward to seeing him here. And over to you, Doron.
Thanks very much, David. So I think you've saved me the introduction about who I am, but thanks very much, everyone, for joining. Great to see so many faces interested in space tech collaboration between Israel and Australia. What David didn't mention is that I was actually born and raised in Australia, so I'm especially excited to participate in this webinar and be involved in the conference, and we're going to be there later this year, and looking forward to see everybody. So as David said, my name's Doron Zauer. I'm a partner at Earth and Beyond Ventures. We're an early stage VC fund. We invest in Israeli deep tech and space tech startups. I don't think we're going to have time to talk much about what we do, but feel free to approach me offline afterwards. Today, I'm here to talk about what new space is and explain how that intersects with the important topic of sustainability. So, starting with what is new space? So, when I start with what is new space, I start with what is old space. Usually, this presentation is more interactive. The answer I usually get from the audience is what comes to mind with old space, and it's NASA. When we talk about new space, what comes to mind? Generally, the answer is SpaceX. It's an illustration, basically, of the first characteristic of what new space is, which is a dramatic reduction in launch costs. You can see some of the metrics there, 18-fold reduction in launch costs. You can see from 95 to 2023, launch costs went down from $26,000 per kilo to $1,500 per kilo. What's that really done is allowed a ton more, it's basically broken the barrier to entry to sending assets into space, and talk a little bit about more what that's led to. The second trend, or the second driving force of new space, are the satellites themselves. In the old days, space was dominated by enormous geostationary, high orbit, very large communication satellites and Earth observation satellites. These days, we have small sats. What are small sats? They're basically, as the word indicates, smaller sats. They can be as small as 10 by 10 centimeter satellites. In 2011, there are about 40 of them in orbit. These days, we're talking about many hundreds, thousands. In 2022, 2,000 satellites, small sats launched to space. There are plans for mega constellations of tens of thousands of small sats, and space is going to be more and more dominated by these cheaper, smaller satellites, meaning the cost has gone from $3 billion per satellite at the higher end, back down to $100K per satellite at the lower end. What does that mean? Or I guess just ending on what is new space. New space, if anyone wants a one-line answer, new space, at least in my view, it's the modern trend of faster and cheaper private space tech development, underpinned by reduction in launch costs, and the second, reduction in the size and advancement and sophistication of satellites and their payloads. And at the payload end, I think we've even got a great Israeli startup at the end talking about it, Nora talking about what they can do with the small and sophisticated payload technology. So why go to space? Space, and I think this is also the main focus of the conference, we don't go to space just to go to space. We go to space to provide tangible benefit right here on Earth. Some of the benefits and use cases going from left to right, the traditional ones, communications and Earth observation. Under Earth observation, you've got agriculture, weather prediction, disaster management. These are all pretty advanced and sophisticated, but existing use cases of space. And more to the right are newer and more modern and next generation use cases of space technology. You've got quantum pre-encryption, manufacturing in space, medical research in space. Space has different properties, so there's a lot of stuff we can do there that we can't do on Earth. In data storage, talking about the data storage farms in space, etc., and then the fact that it'll be a little bit more cyber secure as well. So that's kind of new space. Talking more about where's the opportunity for many of us as investors or startups that are starting their new businesses. Here is a market segmentation. I didn't come up with it. PwC came up with it. It's pretty familiar, or at least gave the stats for this slide. Upstream, we're talking about, we split it into upstream, midstream, downstream. As it is pretty intuitive there. The upstream is everything involved in getting these big assets in, or not so big these days, assets into space. We're talking about the launches and the launch vehicles, reusable these days. We're talking about satellites. We spoke about smaller satellites, ground systems as well. And in those, there are thousands and thousands of systems and subsystems and smaller components. There's huge opportunities for innovation there. It's a very big industry, $102 billion in 2019, grown, I'm sure, a lot more today. That's kind of the first segment of the space industry. The next segment is the midstream industry. We're talking about anything that's associated with keeping these assets in space, collision avoidance, navigation, charging, wellness of in the future of astronauts, in space operations, in space services, etc. It draws quite a bit of a buzz and interest, but as you can see, numbers-wise, it's not an enormous market, but it is a market. Still a lot less than the midstream. Downstream is by far the largest market. What does downstream mean? It basically means taking all the data that we already have in space, using all these assets that are assets being satellites and space stations and in space that are doing great things, aggregating the data, putting some analytics over them, and we'll see some startups that give examples of that, and using them here on Earth. And again, main use cases are satellite communications and Earth observation, but plenty of other things as well that we're going to talk about soon. Based on that same market segmentation, we're going to talk about, there you have Connect 60 was going to talk, which is going to give the presentation later. They are very, they're in the Earth observation business, and then I'll talk about more of their business later. I didn't mention, I've tried to throw in some of the logos of some of the startups that are talking later. AI Craft in the, probably what I suspect to be the upstream business, that we'll hear more from them. Based on this same segmentation of upstream, midstream, and downstream, I want to talk now about how all this fits with sustainability. So breaking it into different examples together with examples of startups that deal with that. In the upstream, which again is building and sending assets into space, you've got eco-friendly fuels, as in a lot of the damage done to Earth is from the fuels that send these launches into space. There are a lot of startups these days that are looking at eco-friendly fuels, non-fuel based launches. Here's an example: spin launch, reusable rockets. I guess that draws the most headlines, and obviously it's very integral to the industry. You're talking SpaceX and Rocket Labs, just a couple of examples of the main players, but there are plenty more players. In the midstream, the space debris, which draws again a lot of headlines, and there are a lot of startups that are trying to tackle this. The issue with space debris, as plenty of you might know, is that every time there's a little bit of a collision in space, it creates a lot of debris. The speed of even a tiny rock in space is a gazillion times the speed of a bullet, so it's kind of going super fast. So if you have like a small little rock or a nut or a bolt that smashes into even a space station, it can do enormous damage. And there's a cascading effect. One collision creates many more collisions. So even so, space is pretty vast. The worry is that in the future, space debris is going to become a problem. There are a lot of startups that are trying to tackle this. Astroscale, Clear Space Today, examples of startups that are doing that. I'm just going to go a bit quicker. I think we're running out of time. Sustainable mining, we have Astroforge, we have resource generation in space. Helios is going to be talking today in the downstream. We've got use cases such as weather prediction. We've got a startup that does that in Israel, tomorrow.io. We've got disaster management. A couple of the notable startups. We've got emissions leak detections. Again, Momentic, which is going to be speaking today about what they do in the emissions, and also another Israeli startup, Astera. I'm actually going to stop here because I think we've run out of time.
Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel Kashmir, CEO of Momentic. Glad to be here with you all. A little bit about us. Momentic is an MRV company. Basically, we're an emission intelligence company. What does it mean? Right now, companies around the world have very low visibility regarding their own emissions. So we are the glasses that enable companies to start seeing, measuring, and reducing their own emissions. How do we do it? We created an accurate and autonomous technology or algorithm that can do full identification and quantification for methane and for other GHG emissions on a planetary scale. We are doing it based on images, based on drone images, aerial images, and especially satellite images. We are connected to 6 different satellites company. With 5 of them, we have a direct API, so our service is almost in real time. We're offering 2 kinds of services: pinpoint monitoring and large area monitoring. Let me tell you about those services. So pinpoint monitoring is for specific assets, assets like offshore rig, a landfill, industrial facility, you name it. The customers need just to log into the system and to provide coordinates, location, lat and long. Then our algorithm, we can see it over here. Then our algorithm generate an accurate emission reports over time for this specific location. Here we can see the visual of the location, the emission, if there is an emission, here is methane, the ppm, the emission rate, how many kilogram per hour can we see? And we are providing those measurements on a weekly or monthly basis. It's not something for a single report. So here we can see the current measurement and the old ones. The red line is the regulation in this specific area. The second service that we are providing is large area monitoring. Here, we are covering a whole region. It could be a long pipeline. This enables companies or countries to start saving hundreds of millions of dollars per year only by identifying those unseen leakages across large projects. So this is our main two services. A short summary about our strength. So we are fully autonomous technology. This enables us to work on larger cover or even a whole region or a whole country. We're a software-only company, hardware agnostic. We're not building satellites and building specific lands, software only. This is the reason that we can work not just on methane. We started with methane, but right now we're working on nitrogen and CO2 as well under the same IP. We are doing it on a planetary scale because of the large scale satellites images. The only one that can work on historical data. We're bringing old data, or working with our algorithm and provide reports about historical dates. Faster time to insight and cost-effective processes only because we're autonomous. This is our main markets. So the oil and gas, the energy sector is obvious. It's first because of the regulations that's just started, and also because those guys are starting to lose a lot of money because of those unseen leakages. Waste management, we're talking about almost 1.5 million landfills worldwide that polluting only methane, and there is an answer or a solution for that. And the carbon credits is the motivator of there. Financial services, so we're starting to work with some major banks only for risk management. Banks, insurance company, data company, and research companies. And also the carbon credits market is a huge market for us, starting to work with two companies in order to get verified. Last slide. So based in Israel, center of Israel, next to Tel Aviv, established a company 3.5 years ago, deep tech company, VC backed by the Tel Aviv University Fund, and also another huge VC from Japan and Israel, raised until now $5.5 million. Right now, raising again, only for focusing on commercialization as well. A strong IP, 8 different patents. Some of them are already granted. This is that. Feel free
Wonderful.
to ask any questions that you have, or just contact us by my email or our website.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. My name is Jonathan Geifman, CEO and one of the co-founders at Helios, an Israeli company that was founded roughly 5 years ago with a wild idea to produce oxygen on the moon. Why? Because humanity is going back to the moon in the coming years under the Artemis programs, and one of the most sought after consumables there is going to be oxygen, both for breathing, but mostly to burn propellant, as most transfer vehicles are going to be 75 to 80% of their weight only oxygen. We have developed a novel process to refine minerals in order to extract that oxygen from the ground, and as a byproduct getting metals. Along the way, we realized that this process is surprisingly efficient in producing iron and other metals, so we decided also to focus on iron here on Earth, one of the most carbon-emitting industries on the planet. 2 billion tons are produced annually, and with our process, we can reduce the direct emissions to practically zero, energy consumption by roughly 50%, and we estimate reduced OPEX by roughly 20%. This is a novel thermochemical process, no hydrogen, no electrolysis, and we are also compatible with low-grade ores, a work that we are doing with Anglo American, one of our investors, and in the mining industry in general. We already are operating a semi-continuous reactor in our lab, producing roughly 1 kilogram an hour of iron, and are estimated to start building our first pilot plant by the beginning of next year. But we never left our space ambitions, and we're still looking up. And why is that? Because in the last 2 years, we have realized, especially by working with the mining industry, that it is not that trivial that we, humanity, are going to have enough of some of the critical metals that are required for the energy transition here on the planet. And the only way to solve it in the coming decades, as we understand it, is by looking up and try to extract them from beyond Earth, near Earth objects and the moon. The only problem is that it is extremely expensive these days. There is no single metal that is probably worth doing that for. Therefore, we need in the coming 2 to 3 decades to reduce operating costs to a level where this will be economically viable. And by economically viable, I mean that it will be easier, cheaper, and maybe even faster to extract, let's say, nickel or copper from an asteroid, near Earth asteroid, than to get a license and develop a new mine here on Earth. One of the critical steps along the way in the near term is to be able to produce oxygen, because it will dramatically reduce costs in cislunar space economics by getting most of the mass for these launching vehicles from beyond Earth, and not we won't have to launch it from Earth. The lunar regolith, the minerals on the ground, are comprising over 40% oxygen, just like here on Earth. And we already demonstrated the technology in the lab in our high vacuum chambers. And next year, we're going to build our first continuous reactor to demonstrate a larger scale system that can be used on the moon later this decade. We are funded by several VCs from the US, Europe, mostly, and Israel, by the Israeli Space Agency, steel industry, mining industry, and so on. We've raised $17 million to date. And if interested, happy to discuss this further. Feel free to reach out to me. And if you have any questions, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Tony, thank you very much. Over to you. And I'll bring up your first slide. CEO with AI Craft.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. Yes, Tony Scoleri, so CEO of AI Craft. Just a quick history about the company. We are about 2.5-year-old. Again, bringing about 20 years of experience in the defense, whether it's surveillance, reconnaissance, weapon systems, electronic warfare. The biggest thing is that now our focus is on artificial intelligence, because when it comes to deploying it in the field, there's a lot of issues, for instance, in terms of excessive power consumption, or the size not being right to fit into systems, or not having enough computational power to actually crunch the numbers. So this is the kind of area where we focus on. It's really this low power system and high performance computing at the edge. Yes, next slide, Chris. So I just thought that I'll give again some of the key issues and what solutions we offer. Again, we bring a mix of our own AI semiconductors and a whole design, again, to facilitate this deployment, training and inference at the edge. Quite often, and especially when it comes to space systems, you can have sometimes some of the competitor systems that are inconsistent in the performance, which means that if you repeat the test, they won't give you the same answer, or they won't process in the same amount of time. Whereas the system we've got has a very predictable performance no matter how many times you run this. The same thing, space systems, they're always limited with power. This is the biggest limitation. Again, systems that boot up that take minutes, that's too long. And especially as we saw before, I believe with Doran, there's thousands and thousands of 6U, 12U, really the nano satellites that are intended to be launched. So again, this is really precious time you don't have. Again, that's something that we address with our system. And as I was just mentioning in my introduction, size, weight, and power are absolutely critical, but also the scale in terms of how much computing do you really need to do the job? Because in the end, you want to be able to get to the analytics. For instance, yes, the emission of carbon, because you want, or if there's a leak, you want to be able to detect that very quickly because it's costly and it can have an impact on the environment and so on and so forth. So again, we address all these issues with our technology. And the other aspect is that, look, there's more and more emphasis to look at other sectors, and transitioning technology from one sector to another is very difficult. And if you don't think beforehand, again, it might mean long development time and cost associated with that. Again, we bring a single framework, whether it's at the edge or also cloud computing technology. And then obviously my last point is about reliability and the lifespan of systems. And that's absolutely critical when it comes to space. Again, we have we are at the cutting edge of innovation, and we're bringing in some new electronics and AI driven as well to enhance all these systems. Again, then you want to develop that very fast. I think I'll also say a last point about the new space, which was mentioned before. The elephant in the room is that, yes, everybody's trying to drive the prices down, but you need to watch your reliability. Because again, there's about perhaps 50% of a lot of the new satellites that are sent in space that don't work or that fail very soon after launch. So that's quite alarming, because then you end up with debris in space, and we know what the effects of that that can happen. Next slide, please. So look, just a quick overview of what we've got. Again, when it comes to space, it's various systems depending on the platforms that you want to deploy. Again, we are agnostic to the software that runs on this. Again, if you're talking, the Pulsar Lite is for the small rovers, or 1U to 3U. The Pulsar is our let's say standard offer on any satellite bigger than 3U and above. Or then if you really have your large satcom, then you have our Pulsar Pro version, which really is a radiation tolerant system or AI semiconductor that is doing the equivalent of what we've got on our servers. Again, on the industrial side, the benefit is that everything's been absolutely optimized for space, but then we have all the designs and we can bring this reliability and efficiency for compact systems when it comes to industrial use. And I've just put a couple of applications there in terms of smart IoT, industrial inspections. People want to strap down, put down in drones inside of the camera systems, autonomous robotics. Again, a lot of things, especially critical for remote operations, where it's already hazardous possibly to go on site and set up all these systems. So it's the type of technology that you want to leave there for 15, 20 years, and they'll give you all the parameters of how your system is running, and you don't want to have to go back. And again, then they'll be able, because it's AI, they'll be able to drive something. So it's quite complementary to SCADA systems. But again, focusing on the large amount of data and the efficiency in deploying those. Look, again, that's just in a nutshell what we have. Really interested in connecting with people at this conference, since we have a remit in both sort of in industrial realm and also space systems. So
wonderful.
There for now. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Tony. And your details are up on screen. And our next presentation, if we can have Ruben and Jimmy up on screen.
Yeah, look, thanks everyone for your time. Hi, Jimmy. Hope you're doing well. We'll do this together, I guess, Jimmy, and a little bit more informally, I guess. Look, I'll just give a quick introduction of LatConnect 60. So we're a Perth-based company, primarily an Earth observation company that collects satellite imagery data and fuses it with other forms of data for vital insights. Insights are delivered as a service through customized platforms to empower government and commercial clients. So we started our company in 2019, and like I said, based here in Western Australia in Perth. We're a company in growth stage right now. We're an unlisted public company. Under the auspices of the Space Bridge, the UK-Australia Space Bridge, we now command and have capacity share on a satellite that was launched by Sari Satellites in the UK. And we've got access to high-resolution Earth observation data and capacity rights and exclusivity over Australia with regional access. We're obviously growing the satellites that we want to have access to, and are working with a range of satellite operators to do so. We provide analytics and insights and services to a number of countries. Obviously, here in Australia, working very closely with the West Australian government, but also in the region, we're currently rolling out our agricultural service for the small rice farmers in Malaysia. We're rolling out an app to about 50,000 farmers this year. So that's a very exciting project. So as a company, we've got, multi-million-dollar contracts on the books right now, and looking forward to growing. Our main focus has really been trying to understand our market and our target markets, especially within the region that we're focused on, and that's Australia and the ASEAN region specifically. And in and around that, building the services and the types of technology we need to onboard in order to provide those services that are needed. And in and around what we're doing currently, we came across Jimmy and his company, which is really, I guess, the point of this webinar. So Jimmy from Neura has some fantastic technology around hyperspectral sensors and filters that we saw as game-changing, and something that we could incorporate into our strategy and our pipeline of well, we're also keen to build our own satellites moving forward for very specific types of data that we need for the markets and that we are focusing on. And we saw a complementarity there with what Jimmy can provide, and very quickly started to talk and working on a number of projects, some joint projects that we started to look at around emissions and looking at the decarbonization market. Yeah, look, I think sky's the limit in terms of what we can do together. So maybe Jimmy, maybe you'd like to talk a bit about Neura and what you're bringing to the table as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Ruben. This is just one of our weekly calls. We're basically on the phone 2-3 times a week these days. So very briefly, Neura is developing a patented hyperspectral imaging system. Hyperspectral imaging captures 100 times more data than a regular camera. So when you're taking an image with your mobile phone or any imaging system, you're capturing images, for example, in the red, blue, green wavelengths. With our technology, we're able to capture images in 700 wavelengths. So we literally capture 100 times more data than a color image or a multispectral image. Now, obviously, the value of capturing a lot of data is that it gives you a lot more capability to detect, classify, and analyze materials, and that can be greenhouse gases, but it can also be any other materials that you can image. Now, conventional hyperspectral has been around for a long time, but it's had two very major limitations. The first is that it relies on very sophisticated equipment, components, and as a result, it's very expensive and very complex to use. And second, when you're capturing a very large data set, 100 times bigger than a regular color image, you're getting a very big data cube, which makes it very expensive to transfer back to Earth from space, or to process on an edge device, or it just makes it very complex to process. It's prohibitively expensive. Now, those are exactly the problems we solve. First of all, our technology, which is patented and has been prototyped, I'll speak to that in a minute, we are able to convert any sensor into a hyperspectral sensor, and without any expensive components. In fact, we take off-the-shelf sensors, any of them, and we convert them into a hyperspectral imaging system. And second, we're able to create data sets with hundreds and hundreds of wavelengths without any compression, without any manipulation, but in data sets that are roughly the same size as a color image, or 95% smaller than a conventional hyperspectral image system. So the bottom line is we're commoditizing hyperspectral imaging. In terms of our status, we have a paid pilot today with Israel Aerospace. They're building our first two cameras for space. They're based on off-the-shelf components, inexpensive, but very high resolution, obviously very high spectral resolution, but also very high spatial resolution. We have an SOW signed with a large US satellite company. We're waiting for final budget approval, and we're going to build additional. It's also a paid pilot. And we've been selected by Bereshit, and we've been working with companies like Lad Connect. It's been a really great partnership. We've submitted already a response to a tender request, and we're hoping to do a pilot later this year. I'll just say in conclusion, a couple of quick notes. We're focused in our go-to-market on greenhouse gases, but our technology enables many different applications. In terms of greenhouse gases, the bottom line is that technology today that's being used with existing satellites, as mentioned earlier today, can capture, for example, images of methane. We can simultaneously and accurately, much more accurately than existing technologies, and we can show this, we can simultaneously and accurately measure greenhouse gases, all methane, CO2, CO, N2O, all the major greenhouse gases at the same time, and with no need to etc. From space, from ground, and from drones. It's very important, I think, to mention that satellites are really a supplement to ground and drone greenhouse gas monitoring, and that's actually an area that we've been working very closely with Lad Connect. So with that, any questions, we'll be happy to try to address them.
Yeah.
Wonderful, gents. Thank you very much for that. And we're right on time. We've only got a few minutes left. We did have 90 minutes for this session, but otherwise we'll see you in Perth, 23rd to 24th of October for the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth Conference at the Pan-Pacific Hotel, Perth, Western Australia. And thank you to the principal partner for that, Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation, foundation sponsor, Business Events Perth, and our founding supporters, Arose, Curtin University, Fugro Spark, and the University of Western Australia. Thank you very much and enjoy your day. I'll end this session now.